Are victims of human trafficking predominantly children? What does it look like for an adult to be a victim of human trafficking? We'll be discussing all this and more on today's Dragonfly Human Trafficking Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to today's episode of the Dragonfly Human Trafficking Podcast. I am Melissa.
And I am Whitney.
I'm the Director of Communications and Development for the Dragonfly Home.
And Executive Director of the Dragonfly Home.
January is Human Trafficking Awareness Month, and so we're doing this podcast series because we're doing a month-long campaign called Getting to the Truth, Common Misconceptions About Human Trafficking. We have already done 4 misconceptions. Today is obviously our 5th. If you haven't heard the other 4, I suggest you go and listen to them. Today we're going to be talking about misconception number 5, and that is adults cannot be victims of human trafficking.
Right. And so, Melissa, you know, we're super passionate about this particular misconception.
Yes.
Adults easily become victims of human trafficking when a trafficker uses force, fraud, maybe this looks like a false job offer, or coercion, and maybe this could be threats or a false relationship like we discussed in the last podcast, providing emergency assistance. So seeing somebody that's in need of shelter or food or clothing and looking to fill those emergency needs, all for the purpose of ensnaring them in the crime of human trafficking. And so with sex trafficking, it's important to remember that exploitation and abuse often started long before adulthood. So we talked about this, and I want to reiterate that most of the victims, survivors that we've been able to assist, they have been on this path of chronic and complex trauma, this continuum of victimization. So yesterday's child trafficking victim is often mislabeled as today's prostitute, which is also something we addressed in the last podcast. On the contrary, if an adult is being sold for sex for someone's financial or other benefit, then that person is a victim of human trafficking. They meet the definition of human trafficking.
Right, absolutely. And we mentioned force, fraud, and coercion. In our very first episode, we talked about that legal definition of human trafficking, which comes from the federal law, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. If somebody is under the age of 18, all that's required for them to be considered a sex trafficking victim is to be sold for commercial sexual exploitation. If someone is an adult, you do have these additional elements, or one of the 3 additional elements that need to be proven, and that's force, fraud, or coercion. And so it might seem like if you're an adult, then you can obviously distinguish if somebody is defrauding you into a false job or offering false love, being insincere. But somebody who is good at manipulation could easily deceive someone. But we also see that an adult, they may not be targeted when they're adults. They might be targeted, like Whitney said, when they were kids. They just happen to be adults now.
Right. So again, many of the people that we've served, maybe they were first sold when they were 12 or 13. And even if they weren't sold at that age, they'd already suffered years of abuse, of some type of maybe neglect or trauma. And so somebody preyed upon those vulnerabilities. And what we like to really kind of drive home is that if you're sold when you're 12 or you're 13, and this is your normal, and this is what you know, and you don't know anything else, then why is it different when you turn 18?
Yeah, it's not like somebody suddenly flips a switch and now it's all their choice. And everything that they do from that point on is an entirely independent decision. If that's been happening to someone when they were a kid, that is so deep within them. I mean, the low level of self-worth, if there's any self-worth, seeing any other possibility in life, seeing another option. By that time, by the time we've dealt with somebody who has been exploited and abused for 10, 20 years, even the option of a different type of future, it just might not even occur to them. And so how are they supposed to suddenly, now they're an adult, be able to pull themselves out of it? It's way more complicated.
Right,
than that.
agree. And so when we see this, and really this goes across the board for abuse, even if it's not straight exploitation, what we see is that children are not finishing school. Maybe they're not getting their GED or their high school diploma. They're not learning a trade. So they're kind of left in life without maybe a healthy support system, without people to help them make good, healthy choices, and without this skill where they can be self-sustainable. I actually think that's one of our most common requests when we're providing services. Women who are looking to attain a higher education, who are looking to get their GED or help with college. And don't get me wrong, we've also served women who have completed college and they have degrees. But this just demonstrates that just because somebody has a degree or they have different things, it doesn't mean that they can't be taken advantage of.
Right.
So we also commonly see as certified providers, as advocates, that many of the people that we serve have developmental delays. So we see women who have suffered years of different abuses and exploitation, and maybe this trauma kind of stunted their cognitive ability. They're not able to understand and make the best choices for themselves. So I know that in the very, very first podcast that we talked about a young lady, and this young lady was sold by her mother as a toddler to local child molesters. And so from the age of being a toddler, being sold throughout her whole life, being born developmentally delayed, her mother was on drugs and using alcohol. She literally couldn't tell the difference between people who were trying to rape her or take advantage of her, exploit her, all of these different things. She wasn't able to determine if they were, truly interested in her, loving her, or if they were trying to take advantage of her. So I think that she is one of the better examples of why developmental delays are important to consider, as are mental health issues. So when we work with these people who've suffered these traumas, we also see PTSD, we see bipolar, we see schizophrenia, we see all of these different diagnoses. And so many of these are the result of what they've been through. It's literally how it manifests, and it certainly changes how they present. It certainly changes how they present to law enforcement, how they present to other service providers. And I don't know how many times I've heard from women who say, people just label me as crazy. They label me as broken. And so these women are literally written off because they have these mental health issues or developmental delays.
So throughout this series, we've been talking about a young woman named Ashley and incorporating her story into all of these misconceptions and the truth about these misconceptions. This is a young woman who Dragonfly staff served. Her name really isn't Ashley. We changed that to protect her identity. But what we're telling you about her is really based on a true story. And it just so happens that all of these misconceptions are incorporated into her real life story. And so for this one, let's think about the fact that she was recruited initially at the age of 16. Her trafficker reached out to her on Instagram, began building this relationship of trust with her until he was finally able to pull her over to his side and isolate her from her family. And so he first began trafficking her when she was 17 years old. Well, that didn't stop when she turned 18. The situation continued as she became an adult. At the age of 18, there was not some switch that got flipped and suddenly all of it was her decision. And the manipulation and the coercion and the years of trauma from her childhood just suddenly no longer applied.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see that Ashley, and in her story, she was arrested. She was treated and labeled as a criminal.
At the age of 18, at that point, these elements of force, fraud, or coercion would be applied to her. In Ashley's case, we see more coercion. And so that concept can be a little bit fuzzy. What does coercion mean? Well, for Ashley, that would look like the fact that they're in a relationship. And so do this for me because you love me, or we need to pay the bills. We're in a team. We're taking on the world together. You're a part of this. And so if you love me, then you'll do this, not just for me, but for us. It could also look like threats. If you look at the other side of the coin, threats of severe violence to the victim, to her family, to her children, or actually harming her with severe beatings. There's all these different ways. The trafficker tries to make it appear to her that it's her decision, but in fact, she's complying under duress. She's an adult and she is being coerced into this commercial sex act. That is how an adult becomes a victim of sex trafficking. So this is our fifth misconception. We have a sixth one, and then we have a bonus seventh misconception that we're going to talk about is going to be really positive and uplifting, though. So hang in there with us. I know this can become kind of a heavy topic after a while.
Yeah, definitely.
But we just want to remind you that it's Human Trafficking Awareness Month. If you're in Oklahoma, check out our website, www.thedragonflyhome.org, for events that are going on. If you're in another state, hey, check it out. You might find something that you can participate in. It's a great time to get involved with the cause.
Yeah, every single person plays a role in fighting the crime of trafficking. So seriously, if you have interest in this, if you feel like you can contribute in any way, step up and get involved during Human Trafficking Awareness Month.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you so much for taking the first step of listening to us.
Absolutely. We will see you next time for our 6th misconception. At the Dragonfly Home Human Trafficking Relief and Restoration Center, victim survivors of human trafficking from Oklahoma and beyond can find help to get a fresh start in life. Our mission is to provide non-residential services, intensive case management, and crisis intervention in a comfortable, home-like setting where victim survivors can access comprehensive services tailored to each individual. We also offer assistance and resources through our 24-hour confidential human trafficking helpline. The Dragonfly Home is a 501c3 nonprofit organization and is state certified by the Oklahoma Office of the Attorney General. For more information, visit www.thedragonflyhome.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. At the Dragonfly Home Human Trafficking Relief and Restoration Center, victim survivors of human trafficking from Oklahoma and beyond can find help to get a fresh start in life. Our mission is to provide non-residential services, intensive case management, and crisis intervention in a comfortable, home-like setting where victim survivors can access comprehensive services tailored to each individual. We also offer assistance and resources through our 24-hour confidential human trafficking helpline. The Dragonfly Home is a 501c3 nonprofit organization and is state certified by the Oklahoma Office of the Attorney General. For more information, visit www.thedragonflyhome.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.